You are now watching the official YouTube channel for the largest basketball manager game in the world. Join at BuzzerBeater.com if you think you can beat the buzzer.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Bubble's BuzzerBeater, the official BuzzerBeater YouTube channel. I hope you are all doing well. Today, we're going to be covering the 2023 NBA Finals and what the starting fives would look like in BuzzerBeater. We're also just going to be talking overall in general about the finals and kind of having a discussion about what we think is going to be going on. I am Apex, the voice you are hearing right now. Normally, your host is Tyler, who is waiting for me to finish his intro because I wanted to give it a shot for him. He brought me on because I am a Heat fan, and the last time I was on this channel, I was here because of my buzzer beater abilities, but now I'm in Division 4, so he has no need for that anymore. So my only use to him is as a Heat fan. So welcome your host, Tyler.
Yeah, you actually timed it pretty well because I know you've been, not paying that close attention to buzzer beater, but I know that at the beginning of this season, you're kind of getting back into it. So it's actually good timing of, you're starting your journey on buzzer beater again, and we're in the finals together. So lined up pretty well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm finally starting to get back into things, and I'm like, wow, Division 4 is not as interesting. And this is after they consolidated everything, so I'm trying to get back into training and setting my lineups, and being a good manager. You know how it is.
Oh yeah, one of the best. So, but yeah, like you said, you're a Heat fan, and if those of you who don't know, I'm a Nuggets fan. So oddly enough, our two teams found their way into the final. So we'll get to talk about our two teams, and it's been an interesting concept I've wanted to do for a while, which is just talking about what players would look like in buzzer beater. And I've done a couple videos like that, which are always, getting some polarizing feedback, because the goal of making realistic players that would actually be possible in buzzer beater, along with accurate players for what they were in real life, is always hard. So you'll notice that in the player comps, if you're watching this, of Apex and I just going through them and going, this is what we think. But if you disagree, totally fine. There's a lot of room for interpretation, which is why, buzzer beater comps for real players is hard. But I guess starting with just the Miami Heat, I know you guys are on like your historic underdog run as the number 8 seed making the NBA Finals. But what is your viewing experience for the Heat been like all season? Because I know it's been a very up and down season for you guys.
Yeah, the regular season was kind of frustrating to watch. It was interesting in the fact that we had a lot of close games. I think there's a lot of stats online talking about like the Heat playing in the most clutch games like all season, like the most games that came down to like 5 points, 3 points. And it was kind of hard to watch the team because a lot of the games that we'd win by like a few points, and then we'd get blown out the next night by like 20 or 30. And I really wasn't as confident as I was in a lot of the other years going into the playoffs this season. And the fact that we at some point had a chance to kind of pull a 4th or a 5th seed in the conference and maybe have home court for a round. And the season just really didn't work out the way that we wanted to. And I really love how everyone kind of pulled it together all at the right time. Watching the first playing game with I believe it was Atlanta was the first one we played and lost. It was a pretty close game. And then the second one we played against Chicago, if I remember correctly, it's been a month and a half. And we did a lot better in that game. I think I won by double digits, I'm pretty sure. And ever since then, it's just been kind of pushing forward with all the guys that we have, even though, Tyler Hero's injured and Victor Oladipo is injured, even though Tyler Hero is coming back soon. It's just been guys stepping up and filling in all the gaps that we need to on like the defensive and the offensive end. So it's really cool from like my viewing perspective to see guys who really didn't get a lot of minutes in the rotation, like Duncan Robinson, coming out and like, shooting the lights out on the Bucks series and really like bringing us stuff that we're missing, like via Tyler Hero, and doing it almost better than he was in the regular season. It's just like spectacular to see, and it's a dream run. And I keep telling everyone, I'm like, I don't know when this is gonna end, but as a fan, as a viewer, I don't know if I'm gonna have another run like this for any sports team, because it is really like historic. So I'm just kind of trying to enjoy the ride and hope that we keep getting further and further.
Yeah, so the Heat season actually reminds me, it's it's one of the few like relatable real life seasons that relates to like buzzer beater, where I know teams, if you're in like a top league and you're just trying to scrape by and like, get a 4 seed or a 5 seed, you're just like tanking home games and you're like, oh, I'm not even going to play players. I just need to keep them in good game shape. And that's what the Heat season was kind of like, was like, oh, they're essentially a 500 team the entire season, but they snuck their way into the playoffs. And as you know, once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. So really, really crazy run for the Heat. And my Nuggets have been kind of on the opposite run. So the Nuggets themselves, they were essentially locked into the 1 seed for like the last month and a half of the season. And we took that time to essentially just rest players and gave the media time to talk about, how we might not be for real. Cause I think we went 7-10 our last 17 games of the season. And kind of crept our way into the playoffs, but we were already locked into that 1 seed. And then, playing some really, really good series against Minnesota and Phoenix and Los Angeles. It's a pretty historic run for the Nuggets too, for, it being a couple of different things. So it was their first sweep that they've ever had in their franchise history when they swept the Lakers 4-0. It's their first finals appearance in their franchise history for the NBA finals. And then it's also just a historic run in that they've only lost 3 games total on this playoff run so far. And kind of that mark of like historically great teams is, if you're losing 3 to 4 games max on like a NBA title run, that's like the best teams of all time. So if the series somehow ends in 4 or 5, like it's a dominant series for the Nuggets, then they would be on par with some of like the best NBA teams of all times in terms of at least like playoff domination. So looking more towards just this matchup and starting to go towards some player comps, I think we want to do this by just, positions. So starting with like point guards and going all the way through the centers, but starting with the point guards, I know Jamal Murray has been on an insane run for the playoffs. And for those of you watching, the potentials for these players and these stats are based solely on their playoff runs, where players like Gabe Vincent, players like Jamal Murray, players like Caleb Martin might look kind of insane skill wise based on how you view them, but this is based off of just the playoff run. So like, for instance, here you can see Jamal Murray, I gave him the legendary jump shot and then 11 passing. He's been a better playmaker than I expected in the playoffs on this playoff run. And his offensive efficiency has just been crazy, where in the Western Conference Finals, he actually went 50-40-90 club for the conference finals, which is the first person that's done that on scoring 30 plus points per game. But give me some love on Gabe Vincent. What have you liked about Gabe Vincent so much for the Heat's run this playoffs?
Oh, Gabe's been great. He's really like hit a lot of timely threes, I think was one of the biggest things that he's done. Because a lot of the times, like if the offense isn't running or if we just need more of an isolation play, he's been really surprising in the fact that he's able to just take defenders off the dribble sometimes and make something happen. And he's been really good at getting into the paint and just hitting open shooters or kind of keeping the ball moving. I feel like sometimes like Lowry's really good at that off the bench for us too. So kind of having a younger version of Lowry that's kind of got that same spark where, he can push a break if he needs to. He can make the right pass or make a drive into something. He's been just really impressive from that aspect. And I'm not going to go into the whole undrafted narrative. I think that's, something that everyone who's watched the conference finals kind of knows about them. It's a lot of underdogs that worked really hard to get here. And I think what Spoelstra does really well with this team is he doesn't try to put players in situations where they need to work outside of their own skill set. So what Gabe Vincent can do, he can drive and kick out. He can obviously make cuts and finish at the rim if he needs to, but it's not one of his best skills. Kind of just him being a smaller guy. So I think Spoelstra puts him in on the offense in a way that what's highlighted mostly is his shooting and his ability to kick out. And he doesn't really need to do much else that he's really uncomfortable with. And then on the defensive end, kind of whether it's the zone or whether it's, matchups that he needs to take and where the help comes from. I think just the way that the Heat are playing really plays into his skill set very well.
Yeah. And looking at the player comp for like the buzzer beater skills for Gabe Vincent, it was funny when I was when you sent me these for the player comps that you made, I was looking at Gabe Vincent's free throws at a phenomenal or 18 free throw, and I was like, he hasn't been that good on the free throw line, and I realized essentially every Heat player is good at the free throw line. Like you guys just don't miss.
Hmm.
But what for Gabe Vincent's, I guess, postseason um, has made you worried about your signing him long term? Because I know he's up as a free agent as well, correct?
Yeah, he is. So it's him, it's Struce, and there's a few other guys that are kind of up to be signed. But Gabe and Max are the two big ones where we're gonna kind of need to make a few decisions. I think because like I think we had this conversation before a few times, but a lot of the role players, and I mean these both of these guys are starters, but starters and role players for teams that make the conference finals and especially the NBA finals are like due for a large payday. And I think both Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, without them chiming in, we wouldn't be here at all. Like there's a chance that maybe we could have made it through the Bucks and the Knicks, depending. I don't even think we'd be through the Bucks, honestly, but definitely not the Celtics. And those two guys are probably getting deals maybe close to like $10 million per year in the offseason. And they're both probably going to want larger guaranteed deals just naturally because they haven't had a big contract yet. They haven't had a big payday. So I think we're going to probably have to make a choice between signing one of those two. And I think probably Caleb Martin's going to want some kind of longer term deal. I think technically he's still signed with us for another year, but there's a chance we're going to want to negotiate him longer term, especially after that incredible run he had in the Eastern Conference Finals. So we're just going to have to make a few decisions contract wise. And I really hope we can just keep finding, these great players kind of seemingly out of nowhere and in like tough positions and like, turning them into great players. And you never know how they're going to perform on other teams, but I feel like someone's going to want to pick them up at that 10 mil per year mark. So it'll be interesting to see how Pat Riley kind of handles the offseason with us, whether we win or not. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the team molds throughout the offseason.
Yeah, the other cool slash crazy thing in terms of like your players, so like Gabe Vincent, like Max Drews, like Cody Martin, when you're looking at these buzzer beater comps for the players, they all look very, very similar. It's almost like, they're plug and play, kind of doing the same things, same sort of efficiency, all really good. Where people talk about, what's the X factor for the Heat in this series, and it's like, well, you guys can kind of have a different X factor for each game because one game it could be Max Strus hitting 6 threes, one game it could be Caleb Martin hitting 5 threes, one game it could be Gabe Vincent. So
Mm-hmm.
they're all kind of plug and play on there. Um, that's where I think Kentavious Caldwell Pope for the Nuggets is going to be huge. And just if someone is getting hot, I think KCP is going to be the player that they're throwing on whoever is hot for that game. So if Max Strus hits back-to-back threes in the first 3 minutes of the game, the Nuggets might say, okay, Kentavious Caldwell Pope, you're going to go be their primary defender now. So like looking at the Kentavious Caldwell Pope player comp here, you can see he has the 19 outside defense. His defending this playoff run has been insanely good. And I think with the amount of size and length that the Nuggets have, the fact that he's just been so solid defensively, especially on like smaller guards. Like when he was defending Devin Booker, that was a little bit of a problem because Devin Booker's 6'6", 6'7". I'm not sure how I'd feel about him on Jimmy Butler, but on a lot of these smaller guards and wings, I think Kentavious Caldwell Pope with like his 19 outside defense and other good attributes on him, I think can be a really good play. Who do you think the Heat will try to target defensively on the Nuggets?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure because we were talking about this a little bit like earlier when we were chatting just in the Discord. Me and Tyler talk a lot, kind of like as games are going on and as like news and headlines come around. But the Nuggets are a pretty sizable team when it comes to their height, and they've got it 1 through 5 all the way around. Even KCP is 6'5", and I don't know what his wingspan is, but every single time I watch him play basketball, his wingspan looks much larger than his body. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 6'8", 6'9", just because he's able to get to the places where he needs to be defensively very quickly and like put a hand up on seemingly every shot. So like you said, just like an elite defender. I don't know who we're going to attack. I feel like there's chances for us to kind of get after maybe Michael Porter Jr. or Aaron Gordon and kind of try and like maybe with Aaron Gordon try something where we're beating him off the dribble, or maybe Jimmy will try a little bit of a back down on Jamal Murray. I can see that being a matchup that we might want to take and use. But I feel like for us, it's always just like try to move the ball around and see what we can get. It's like prying our way in and just testing different sides of the court, seeing how you guys move around and switch and trying to figure out a way to get in there. But even like the Celtics are a team that I feel like outsizes us quite a lot. And you guys take it to the next level up. So it'll be really interesting to see how both coaches kind of handle a lot of those matchups. And maybe it'll be inside on Jokic, but the way that Bam played in the end of that Eastern Conference Finals series against the Celtics, I don't know if that's going to get the job done because, there's a lot of talk about, oh, Jokic isn't, an amazing interior defender. And it's like, well, he's not. But if Bam's can't finish over Derek White, he's not going to get it over Nikola Jokic. So it's going to be one of those things where that's one of our keys is like Bam's got to get there, got to be aggressive, and he's got to make plays happen because I feel like some of your guards and wings are really fast and really long, and the 3-point shots might not be coming as easily as they did before.
Yeah. Like you said, Michael Porter Jr., I think he's improved a ton defensively where he used to be literally be an eyesore on defense and would get like pulled off of the court. Looking at his player comp for BuzzerBeater, he has a 14 outside defense and 11 inside defense. So obviously that's not like atrocious or anything, but he's definitely the one that I think could be picked on, especially by Jimmy Butler. Michael Porter Jr. is not like disciplined in that I think would go for a lot of the ball fakes and just foul Jimmy Butler. That's something that he does very, very well. So I'm curious to see how MPJ holds up in this series. As you said, you talked about the Denver Nuggets size in regards to the Heat are a little bit of a smaller team, or at least their rotation is. The Nuggets are a lot bigger. And, Michael Porter Jr., I think his rebounding is going to be a huge aspect as to what keeps him on the court if he is getting picked on defensively, where on the BuzzerBeater comp, I have 13 rebounding for him as a small forward because he's 6'10" and just a huge, huge human being. If he has someone smaller like Caleb Martin on him, who's 6'5" and giving up 5 inches, I think rebounding could be a huge aspect that kind of keeps him in the series and how he impacts the game in another way. Going on to kind of like the power forward matchup, I guess, which is a different kind of power forward matchup, but the Jimmy Butler, Aaron Gordon kind of setup where I imagine Aaron Gordon's going to be the player who's defending Jimmy Butler the most, just because of his strength and his size. How do you view this Aaron Gordon, Jimmy Butler matchup in terms of Jimmy Butler offensively? Do you think this is a positive matchup, a neutral matchup, or do you think this is one that Jimmy might struggle with?
I think it's going to be harder for Jimmy. I know Jimmy's very creative. So the Celtics last series, there was a lot of talk about this too. The Celtics last series stopped falling for the pump fakes. They just stopped going up on them, and they just stood straight up and waited for Jimmy to go up for the shot. And it worked great in game 6 because he was trying his pump fakes and he was just getting into the paint and getting stuck with 2-3 defenders coming towards him. And it led to some pretty bad shots. And I think if the Nuggets kind of follow the same tune, it'll be Jimmy adjusting to either, going in there aggressively, really not going for the fakes as often and trying to finish inside, or picking his matchups. He likes to do this where he'll take it to, one side of the court, ISO, get everybody out to the other end. And he was doing this against Derek White. He was doing this against Drew Holiday in the series before, Jalen Brunson against the Knicks, where you just kind of pick on someone, start backing down, and then make another defender come to help and try to make the right pass out to one of the shooters. So I feel like that's he's going to try to probably avoid operating on Gordon 1v1, just like you said, because of how good he is defensively. But we'll see. We'll see how the Nuggets kind of prepare for him. I think it's been very well known now that Jimmy is very creative and likes to do his pump fakes. So I don't think it's going to work as well as it did in the Bucks series, where he's just getting people jumping all over him. I feel like Aaron Gordon's a little bit smarter than that.
Yeah. And looking at the Jimmy Butler comp, I guess for me, creating the buzzer beater equivalent of Jokic was just like mind boggling. Like I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I know Jimmy Butler was probably like just as difficult, but what went into your mindset when you're kind of creating this player comp where you can see this 148 total skill point player? What skills were you trying to get across, or what were the challenges when trying to make this buzzer beater comp for someone as good as Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, I feel like it's always an art to make the buzzer beater comps, because you want to make them, you want to respect the player and their skill set, but you also want to make them builds that are, possible or feasible within buzzer beater and kind of work within the game's engine. Because there's just some builds that, because of salary, people don't make, and because of what they want in certain places around the court in certain positions, they're just not going to build a player that way. So it's a little bit of trying to mold both together. And I think Jimmy's jump shooting this series has been, like, I will say, quite literally phenomenal. So I wanted to give
Quite
him,
literally, yes.
yeah, yes, quite literally. So I wanted to give him a big nod there. His 3-point shooting has been much better than the regular season, but still isn't up to par with the shooters that we've got, like Duncan and Gabe and Max. So I think sensational was fitting there. His outside defense has been great. I feel like people don't really target him at all when they're in this. Like when you're playing against the Miami zone, I feel like you're always going to go up against either like Lowry or Vincent or Duncan. Like you're going to pick somebody else. You're never going to want to go against Jimmy just because of how active he is. His hands are very active. He'll cut into passing lanes a lot and really make it tough for the offense to operate. If they're just skipping passes around the outside, he'll hop lanes so much, get the steal, and go on the other end and do a break and dunk. We've seen it a bunch of times in the postseason. Handling and driving, both very high. I feel like, it's after we saw kind of Tatum and Brown do a lot of miscues there. You think to Jimmy Butler, and you really don't see that happen very often, where he just kind of loses the ball and gives it over. He's pretty good in both those areas. Passing at a 12, I think, is pretty good. Just somewhere in the middle there where he makes the passes when he needs to and can kind of hit open shooters. The passes really don't seem to go out of bounds very often or be underthrown or overthrown. So I think that's a pretty good spot for him. Inside shooting is only at a 16. I don't think he's up to par with, some of the big men in the league, but definitely a good forward finisher. Inside defense at a 15, he's kind of got the size and the strength to guard down low. Rebounding at a 13, definitely can get up and grab some of those boards. And then shot blocking, definitely not something he's known for, but does it at times. He's actually statistically, I'm pretty sure, one of our worst free throw shooters, because he doesn't shoot above 80%. So he's at like 79 or something, which, oh no, 79%, right? But we gave him a 14 for that. And then stamina, I have him at a 10, and I very much wanted to make sure that was a 10 in there. I like double checked. I'm like, yeah, this has to be a 10, because we've seen so many images of Jimmy playing like full games where he's entirely gassed. There's that one image from him playing in the 2020 finals against the Lakers. I think it was game 5 or game 6. And he's just sitting like hunched over one of the bars and is just like sweat dripping out of him. He can barely breathe. I think he had to go to the line to hit some free throws, and he's got like a 40-point triple double or something. So he really does just not quit, and it feels like he's always got the hustle to be on the court. So I kind of wanted to put all of that in, and I feel like this is a player that you can see in buzzer beater. Like this is somebody who's kind of your outside operating small forward, maybe just like an all-rounded small forward. And I think this is a pretty good build that fits his skill set.
Yeah, so 10 stamina definitely makes sense. I was looking at minutes played per game for the playoffs, and Jimmy Butler's at 39.4. So I imagine that by the end of this playoff run, he'll average 40 plus minutes a night, which is just incredible, playing basketball at that high of a level and not being completely dead afterwards. But yeah, 10 stamina definitely makes sense there for him. Looking at the power forward for the Nuggets, Aaron Gordon, you can see the 11 jump shot and 7 jump range right there. I think he is a really, really important piece where if he's making shots, the Nuggets will be very, very tough to beat. However, as most of you probably know, if you're playing BuzzerBeater, if you're a shooter who has 11 jump shot and you're playing against someone with like 15, 16 outside defense, you're not going to make a lot of shots. So Aaron Gordon's in a spot where I think he's our shakiest shooter, and he could be the player where if he's not making shots, it could very well allow the Heat to just play off of him, help on other defenders, and kind of let him shoot. And it's like the old saying of, I'm open, I'm open. It's like, yeah, you're open for a reason because they don't think you can make the shot. So I think he'll be a pretty important piece where if he's on, I think we're very, very hard to beat. If he's off, that could be the recipe for the Heat to, pull out some games that they might have not won originally. So, yeah, transitioning a little bit more to the big men. So Jokic and Bam Adebayo, two of my favorite centers in the entire league. I know Bam Adebayo's been really, really good for a really long time, yet he's only 25 years old. And it's shocking to me because he was so productive as a young player. And I think he just gets better defensively every year. He's always in the running for Defensive Player of the Year in the NBA. And part of that's because of like the switchability of him being a 6'9" center, but being able to guard, shooting guards and point guards with so much ease. What have you liked about Bam Adebayo this playoff run, and what have you not liked in terms of him? Because I know he's had some ups and downs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think defensively, I always like Bam. I think Bam defensively is really good at staying grounded. He really doesn't get into foul trouble very often at all, which kind of in today's NBA, I feel like big men, a lot of them struggle with that, especially when you're 6'9". I think he does a great job of getting after shots and just being a threat in the paint where a lot of teams don't want to just drive directly into him. They got to make a play around him or try to pull him out somehow. And even when they do, even when they pull him out, it's not like a free 3-pointer for them.
Yeah.
They got to work for it just because he's able to guard on the outside there. Kind of my issue with him has been more on the offensive end, where some games you'll get a really aggressive Bam and you'll see it from the start. He's doing spin moves in the paint. He's taking the ball down and just kind of starting breaks on his own. He does have really great moments of really, amazing passes out to shooters too at times. And then at other times he'll get caught in the paint and he'll just kind of sit there lackadaisically, throw up some weird hook shot that really isn't very high percentage for him. And it's sometimes you'll get one Bam and sometimes you'll get the other Bam. Sometimes it comes in like one will be there for one half, one will be there for another half. So I think if he can consistently be his aggressive self where, he grabs the ball and he makes a move and it's not just kind of sticking around in the paint there and he's forcing up weird shots, that's where he's at his best. But I think defensively, he's been really excellent these playoffs.
Yeah, looking at the buzzer beater comp that you had for Bam, I was looking at his jump shot and inside shot, and I was like, that feels low for him. But watching him this playoffs has definitely been, like you said, the less desirable part where he'll just miss some shots where you're like, you're 6'9", like can you just go up strong for the layup or can you just dunk that?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll say I really like the skill layout for him as like 132 total skill point player, really good inside defense, really good outside defense. Will he be enough to stop or at least slow down Nikola Jokic though?
I hope so. I think it'll be a group effort from us, definitely with Jokic. I think Jokic and his ability to like people say all the time, he's got this little supercomputer in his head, kind of like LeBron does, where he can read defenses and he knows what's being thrown at him, and he can kind of make the right passes when he needs to. He can be aggressive when he needs to. He can show great finesse and footwork when he has to, and it'll be really interesting to see how Jokic kind of handles the zone. And just looking at your Jokic build, which I know, I remember when you shared with
it
me,
broke
it's like,
my brain.
wow.
It broke my brain.
Yeah, no, it's really difficult. And 311,000 estimated salary is something where it's like, damn. But I feel like the build really, really does do him justice in the way that, the inside shot is 20 as it should be, just because he's so good at finishing down there. He can kind of go aggressively, even though he's not known for dunking it much. He doesn't have to. It's just amazing with 20 inside shot where you don't need to be a dunker. You can do the finesse, the footwork, do some pump fakes, and he's just so fast with his moves. And I feel like you did a great job of kind of showing that there. I like that his jump range is 11 because I feel like, especially these playoffs, he's just been great from deep when he has to. The handling is definitely incredible. And yeah, maybe you can also just walk through that build a little bit, because it's like 150 TSP is crazy, but he really does deserve that because he's been playing great in the regular season, and then he's even stepped it up in the playoffs, which is awesome.
Yeah, so the first thing I noticed and the first thing I wanted to make sure when I was making the build for the buzzer beater comp was I wanted to make sure he wasn't instantly going to be the highest salary player on buzzer beater. So
Uh-huh.
currently, I believe there are 6 players with a 300K salary or higher in buzzer beater. Um, I think it's Jokeru in the forums who actually posted, like, the highest salary players went through. I think there was 5 or 6 of them 300K salary or above. So my goal is to keep him below 315K salary. Um, and this is kind of the build that I came up with. So defense is the spot where, I've always been higher on Jokic as a defender than, the general public, I think, because I think he does a lot of things that don't show up in the box score, but are good defensively. So like one of them is the amount of times that he tips passes is really, really frequent, really, really good. He also leads the NBA in kicked balls, which is not a stat that's like highly regarded, or not a stat that's going to like show up on ESPN, but he will get any body part in the way of the ball if it stops an entry pass. So that's something that's underrated that I think he does really well. And then the last thing is just his rebounding. So rebounding for Jokic is insane, just offensively and defensively. So you can see the 17 rebounding was about as high as I could get it, with me like feeling it's in a good range while also showing like the effectiveness of his rebounding. And he just gets so many tipped offensive rebounds and closes out so many possessions defensively with rebounds, where people don't realize, both in buzzer beater and in real life, that ending a possession with a defensive rebound is so important, because there's so many offensive boards in the game. And defensive rebounding is a part of defense, whether you believe that or not. I've always believed that ending a possession with a rebound is just as valuable as getting the initial stop, and that's something that he does incredibly well. So I wanted to show that off in his player build. And then, 150 total skill points. Jokic just does so many different things really, really well. The one thing that is lower in his player build is that outside defense, where, like most centers in the NBA, if your name's not Bam Adebayo, if your name's not Anthony Davis, if you get put on an island with a really good shooting guard, for example, he's likely going to torch you. So that's where Jokic is 285 pounds roughly. So giving him 7 outside defense, that's about as high as I can make it and feel good about it. But there's definitely opportunities for the Heat in the finals, as well as teams just in general, to target him on the perimeter outside if they can pull him away from his initial defensive setup.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that weight also is what kind of benefits him on the defensive end, and what makes him a little bit underrated there, because you kind of look at, people do talk like negatively about him on defense, and you look at his defensive raptor, which is just like an advanced stat that they use to try to like estimate the impact of a player on either end, on the offensive or defensive end of the floor. And he's just like really high up there. I'm pretty sure what his offensive one is like +10, his defensive one is +4 around or higher. Was it plus 10 too? Do you
It's
remember?
it's high here. You keep talking, I'll look it up for you, okay?
Yeah. So I remember he was leading that stat throughout basically the entire regular season. And I'm pretty sure the playoffs it's still up there just as high as before. But being 285 pounds, you kind of command the paint, where he's going to be able to pull down a lot of those rebounds just because of his size. And I feel like it also, like I said with Bam, it kind of deters people from wanting to just drive into him. And it makes the rebounding really difficult, which for the Heat is going to be a very hard matchup because we're already struggling with offensive rebounds in our last few series. Randall was giving us a really tough time. I know we were having a really tough time with just the size of the forwards, and you saw Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown flying in for those boards and grabbing them and putting them back up, and Derek White, of course, at the end of Game 6 there,
the
and
heartbreaker.
the heartbreaker. Oh, I yeah, that was something, and we just really struggled all season, and I feel like Jokic is gonna double down on that, and if you guys can hold the rebounding advantage and like hold it, mightily, I think it's going to be really hard for us to pull out wins. I feel like that's something that we're going to have to work on and figure out how to balance our time in the zone where we're having issues rebounding, and then our time where we're wanting to go more of a man setup so that we can box out better. But that'll be interesting to see.
Gotcha. And then I did look up the Raptor. You're pretty spot on. So for offensive Raptor, Jokic is at a plus 9.8, and for defense, he's at a plus 3.4.
Okay.
And then he leads the NBA in total Raptor by a landslide. He's at plus 13.2, and the next closest person is the MVP of the league, Joel Embiid, at plus 7.8.
Yeah.
So that's how much the advanced numbers love Jokic.
Yeah, and I mean, people say like +4. It's like +4 is not bad because, like, you think +10. It's like, oh, +4 is such a drop. It's like, oh, these numbers are nobody really gets +10. +10 is an anomaly from Jokic. Like +4 is a really, really, really good score. I don't know where that puts him in, like, top 10, top 20. I'm not sure, but that's not like +4 is not a bad score at all. It's actually really impressive.
Yeah. And then I know you mentioned a little bit about the Miami Heat zone. I was thinking about the Heat zone and kind of what that would look like in BuzzerBeater. And if you want to explain it, I know the zone that Eric Spoelstra draws up for the Miami Heat players, it's not really a 3-2 zone, and it's not really a 2-3 zone. So in BuzzerBeater, you're in that weird spot where it's not really applicable to anything that teams in BuzzerBeater run, but it's more of like a 2-2-1 zone. Could you maybe explain how the zone has worked so well? Because this is a team that has ran zone more than any other NBA team this season. What about the zone has worked so well?
Yeah, so there's an interview that I watched. Shout out to the JJ Redick podcast, just because I watch it almost daily. I'll watch at least a clip off of it. And there was one video where he talked about that zone specifically, and the fact that the Heat actually practice the zone. And you think, oh, well, that's not uncommon, right? Apparently, we're one of the only teams in the NBA that does it. Like, a lot of teams will throw zone out as like a last resort or as a way to try and contain a player when they're really hot, or as something that, oh, we're just going to leave it on the back burner. But the Heat actually run it and practice it, and when you leave it on the back burner like that, it's very prone to being broken because there's a lot of ways to handle a zone. You can load up one side where you get 4 players on one side of the zone and 1 player on the other, and there's several plays you can run to find openings. You can throw lob passes over the top of it to kind of open cutters, because it's hard when you have guys running in between multiple positions. And I feel like what I see when I watch the Heat zone is just like really, really great communication, where it looks like everyone's almost on a string and they know where they have to be at all times. It's really nice to watch. It's like you can see that they're running it in practice, and they've got a lot of reps and a lot of hours doing it because they've been doing it for a few seasons. And a lot of these players have been on the Heat since 2019. I mean, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus have been around for a while. Obviously, Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson have been around since 2018. Jimmy Butler also. Kind of one of the newer guys to the rotation is Caleb Martin, and he looks like one of the best out there in it. And I think just having everybody on a string, knowing when you have to come up and double, knowing when you have to run out to a shooter and really like give all your effort, and kind of being able to adapt too. Because I feel like sometimes I'll see that zone and I'll see him being fine, like Eric Spoelstra being fine, leaving people open in the corner, and then just having one guy running out to them to make sure they're like firing up a shot. And then other times where like the zone kind of stays a little bit more pushed out and guys aren't as committed to like helping inside. And I feel like they can adjust it based on what they're concerned about or who has the ball or who's playing really well in that game. And I think their ability to go from man back into a zone and back out is due to like a lot of being able to practice it and a lot of having guys communicate with one another and know where they're going. So trying to translate it to buzzer beater is difficult because there isn't really a one way to do it. I feel like the point of it really is to try and limit the 3-point shots and maybe help on people who are driving in the paint. But there really isn't like a great comparison into buzzer beater for it. It is really its kind of own unique thing. I feel like they start out in a 2-3, and then once the ball starts moving around, they'll either break it up into a man defense when there's like 5 seconds left on the shot clock, or they'll transition it into like a 3-2, depending on what's going on. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. And with the full court pressure that they put on too, they'll try and move the shot clock down. You'll see guys trying to sit there and hound people. And as the shot clock goes down, they don't really get into their offense until later. So there's really less time to break the zone when that happens. If they can full court press and bring it down to like 13, 14 seconds by the time the other team gets into their offense, it's really hard to get to a point where you've got that open lob pass or the skip pass into the corner for the open 3-pointer. So I feel like they just do a great job of meshing together and making it work.
I'll say offensively, is there a buzzer beater offense that's more comparable to what the Heat run? Like if you had to compare the Heat's offense to something in buzzer beater, how would you compare it, or how would you describe it?
I don't know if it would be like something between a motion and like a run and gun. It's definitely a lot of 3-point shooting, especially in the playoffs. I feel like our offense kind of changed a little bit because we were shooting really poorly in the regular season from 3. And then something clicked and we started running a lot more of the plays that worked. And it became more 3-point oriented. Like guys were just committed to taking the shots when they had them, whether they were like lightly contested or wide open. And it would definitely be, it's not as fast as a run and gun, so maybe like some sort of emotion for the most part, and then maybe a little bit more of like kind of trying to get it down into Jimmy and then looking for a pass out. So maybe like a Princeton there. I'm not entirely sure though.
Yeah, I'd say the Nuggets is probably a mixture between inside isolation and low post because everything essentially starts and goes through Jokic when he's on the court, and then he kind of disperses everything out. But it's just so interesting to think about. Buzzer beater offenses sometimes feel so black and white, where in like the NBA and other high level basketball leagues, like teams aren't just running one thing, and teams are often running something that's a combination of 2 or 3 different offenses in buzzer beater in terms of like personnel and who's on the court. So just interesting thing to think about offensive and defensive wise. Transition to kind of last thing I want to talk about was just what are your thoughts as a Heat fan and as an objective NBA fan for the series itself, and what is your prediction for the series in terms of who's winning the championship and in how many games?
So, if you want my predictions both as a Heat fan and as an objective NBA fan, I'm going to give you a list of goals kind of that I want from Miami. And if they can reach those goals, I think it can be Heat in 6 is what I want to say. If they can actually reach these goals. So the goals would be controlling the offensive rebound is one of them. Managing Nikola Jokic is another one, just as how well he's been doing. I think we kind of touched on all these topics, so I'm just going to kind of go down the list really quickly. I think Jimmy Butler needs to keep playing as well as he is, and hopefully Caleb Martin can as well. And the 3-point shooters between Strus, Duncan, Vincent, and then eventually Hero, if he does come back, need to kind of keep shooting at a high clip. And if all these things happen, I feel like Heat in 6 is a very, very possible thing. I think as well, I think we have a little bit more finals experience just throughout the roster because a lot of this roster was around in 2020. I know you guys have KCP, who has some reps in the Lakers championship in 2020 as well. But I feel like the finals experience hopefully is gonna drive us a little bit. I feel like it'll be really important to take one of the first 2 games on the road. In altitude, I know it'll be difficult with such little rest, but maybe just having just come off of a game 7 where it was all, very high stress situation, maybe we'll still be in that kind of like mode game 1 and we can steal one there. And then we're going to want to win the home games afterwards. And that's kind of how I think our roadmap to winning the series is. Now, if you guys manage to really cut us off of one of those goals, 1 or 2 of those goals. I think if it's just 1, I think there's still a chance it's Heat in 6. If you cut us off of 2 or more, I think it's very possible you guys can take the series in 5. I think it's either going to be Heat taking it in 6 or 7, or you guys just taking it in 5. I feel like if Jokic can break the zone and you guys are just grabbing offensive rebounds, I don't see how Miami can pull it out, just because it's too much to deal with all at once. But if we can figure out a little bit more of how you guys, run your offense, and we can kind of slow down Jokic on that end and also control the boards, then we've got a better shot.
That was a very thorough explanation. I know mine will not be as in depth. But yeah, I think you'll learn a lot about the series and the Heat's ability to either, hang and start off the series on a good note. If they fall down, I think 2-0, then I agree with you. I think the series will end kind of quicker because, the Heat have been fighting in intense series essentially for the last 2-3 weeks between the Knicks series and the Celtics series. It is nice for you guys that all of the finals games, except for 1, provide 2 days rest. So I think that is very good for you guys, especially in the altitude situation. Mm-hmm. Me as a Nuggets fan, I think Nuggets in 5 is what I feel. So similar to your like kind of neutral / pessimistic prediction, I think that's what my kind of Nuggets prediction is Nuggets in 5. I do think Eric Spoelstra is good enough to draw the series out longer, where I know in the bubble series, you guys just got screwed with a bunch of injuries in the finals, and your injury luck has not been much better this playoff run. But assuming that everyone who's currently healthy right now will stay healthy, I think my realistic prediction would be Nuggets in 6. So that's kind of my prediction is Nuggets in 5 to 6. Crazier things have happened though. I mean, I'm sure Celtics fans weren't saying that the Heat could beat them either, and I'm sure that the Knicks and Bucks were saying the same thing. So if the shooting kind of falls your way, I think it's definitely a opportunity that the Heat could get hot like they did against these other teams and do really well. But Nuggets in 5 or 6 feels like what I predict to happen. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I keep looking back at Dirk's championship run against the Miami Heat and how kind of he exploded and played a lot better, and everyone on the role players in that run, like Jason Terry and everyone just kind of stepped up, right? And I'm seeing very many similarities to kind of how Miami's operating. And I know in 2011, LeBron kind of really kind of slowed down and wasn't really what they wanted from LeBron. So I think I don't think that Jamal Murray or Nikola Jokic is going to pull that, but it's possible. And that's kind of what I'm hoping from the Heat is they've surprised me a lot this postseason. And there's been a lot of series going into it where it's like on paper, this doesn't make sense, but like if everything works out, we could win this. And like the Bucks series, we did it in 5, and the Knicks series was in 6. So nothing really got pushed out terribly far until you get to the Celtics series. So yeah, but I do think on paper and just like watching you guys through the playoffs, the Nuggets have been the most cohesive team, and your wins just look comfortable and everyone knows what they're doing. And I feel like a lot of teams this postseason, we've seen them just like fall apart. And I believe, at least in the Western Conference for the Nuggets, that's kind of, you guys have been doing that to other teams. That's not other teams. LeBron and AD were struggling because you guys are making them struggle. So it's not we got lucky. It's this team is really, really good, and they're making it really tough for the star players on other teams to do well. So it should be a really interesting finals.
Yeah, I know we're both excited, and once the games get going, I'm sure we'll be on Discord just raging at each other about the referees and the role players who aren't playing well and how the coach needs to do this or that. So it should be really fun. But we'll go ahead and call it right there. I appreciate everyone for listening to this. I have a goal of doing some more NBA content related to Buzzer Beater, just because I think this is something that's really interesting to kind of cover and do these sorts of player comps. And it's also something that I think just, casual NBA fans that might be interested in Buzzer Beater are more drawn to these sorts of videos where they recognize NBA content, and we could get some more users on Buzzer Beater through this as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Apex, I'll go ahead and let you go, and then I'm sure we will talk real soon about the NBA Finals.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you for having me on.